Okay, I'm Dr. Gordon Petty. I was born in 1920 in Carthage, or South Carthage, and I haven't gotten very far in the world, about a mile, in all my lifetime, and I'll soon be 94 years old. I started out here in the heat of the Depression when things were really at a premium, and everybody lived a rather close life then, and rather frugal, and we were all happy. We didn't know there was anything better along, but we were all happy. And it's such a change that has happened since then that it's just hard to imagine the differences between then and now. Each household was heated by grates or fireplaces or little heaters, and instead of so many bedrooms and so many baths, we had so many bedrooms and a path, and the path to the outhouse, and nobody had indoor plumbing in Carthage, and that's all changed. And then along in the when I was about 10 or 12 years old, we had developed running water in Carthage, and so then things changed a whole lot. People began building bathrooms, and so we had indoor plumbing for a change. And I'll have to admit that if I had a choice between electric lights and electricity and running water, I'd take running water, because I remember those outhouses were mighty cold on a cold, frosty morning. But at that time, weather was a lot colder than it is now, just like Al Gore has been preaching to the world on global warming. At that time, we had sub-zero weather every winter that I remember, and we had a big thermometer on the back porch, and I frequently saw temperatures -4, -5 in that area just about every winter. And we had big snows then. I remember 2 snows that were in excess of a foot in Carthage. Now there hasn't been, I'll say, 5 inches of snow in the last 5 years in Carthage total, added all together. There's been a big change, and I don't remember any weather under in the single digits. I don't believe any time in the last 5 years here. Or there's a lot of difference between 10 degrees and -4 or -5, and so there's a big change there. And I grew up in a rather happy a home as it could be, I guess. We were poor, everybody else was poor. It was right in the heat of the worst depression, and but we were happy. We had plenty of food to eat. We had new overalls, a pair of new overalls nearly every winter to start out school with, and my mother and father at one time had been teachers, and then my father became county surveyor, and he was county surveyor for 70 years. But at home, we at night we boys were not interested in going out and ripping around the countryside and dating and carrying on. We stayed at home. We played rook at night. There was 5 boys in the family, and we got together and leveled off a part of the hillside and made our own croquet ground. And we didn't have bulldozers. We had a wheelbarrow and a spade and a grubbing hoe, and that's the way we did it. But we built it ourselves. We had a good time doing it. We played baseball, and Mother and Dad played baseball with us. We had a basketball goal on the front of the barn, and we played basketball. But at night come, we'd play rook. Now we'd play rook till 8 o'clock, but 8 o'clock sharp, Mother and Dad, it's time for books. And we got down and studied, and we studied till 10:30 every night, and we got up our lesson for the next day thoroughly. If we were having trouble, Mother or Dad, one would help us out, and we'd dig into it till we got it straightened out. But education has changed so much. Now my father and mother taught together at Difficult, a little community in the north end of the county here. when they were growing up, or soon after they got grown. And at that time, Dad and Mother, one or the other of them, taught Latin and algebra. Now that's in a grammar school up there. There's an 8th grade grammar school, but they had Latin and grammar, and Latin and algebra. And they had music, they had piano, and they had violin teachers. And so it's amazing what they had in the way of education, and we think they were backward in education back then. Surprising, they weren't as far back as we think they were, and so that too has changed a lot. Now, everybody's expected to go to college, or they really think they really ought to. So we boys lived pretty well a home life, but all of us went to school. My older brother was graduated in civil engineering. I finished in medicine, and one brother finished in counting, and another went on and went through 3 years of medical school. But my father and mother harped on education, and I've felt the same way ever since. And so then I went on and I finished college at the age of 20 over at Cumberland University. That's the only place I could afford to go, because my father told me when I was real young, with 5 boys in the family and the depression on, if you boys are going to college, you're going to have to earn it yourself. So when I was about 14 years old, I began working store in Jim Smith's General Country Store out here on the edge of town every Saturday and after school. And I made big money then. 16 hours on Saturday, I made $1.25 for that. After school, he paid me 35 cents to work from about 3:15 to about 7. But I saved that money to go to college on. And I managed to get through college, and I finished in 3 years. I was only 20 years old at that time, but I finished and managed to get through. But I wanted to go to medical school, but look there again, medical school cost a whole lot. And so I had to go to work. I had had a whole lot of drafting at Cumberland University and a whole lot of math. In fact, when I finished college over there, in my last year, the math teacher had a mental breakdown, and another student, one of my classmates and I, J.B. Leftwich and I, finished out his courses of teaching math for the last 2 or 3 months of the year for him. And so then I had a whole lot of drafting over there. And so I took a job at Consolidated Devotee in Nashville in the engineering department as a draftsman. And realizing that I was deficient in aeronautical engineering, and so many in the engineering department there had degrees in engineering. So I began going to school at Nashville and at Vanderbilt at night, taking engineering courses. I'd take one course for a semester, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights, and 3 hours. I got 3 hours in. I took aeronautics, and airplane engines, and airplane stresses, and tool and jig design, and I almost had a degree in the qualifications for a degree in aeronautical engineering, but piecemeal I had gotten it, and I worked hard and worked up in the engineering department there. And I had a fairly impressive job by the time I got through, but then the war came on. Well, I was deferred. I had a deferment because it was deemed that I was more important in the industry there than I would be in the Army or military. And so I worked on there about less than 3 years, and the war developed, and I always believed that life was made up of experiences, and I didn't want to miss out on anything. And here, war was going on. Three of my close friends that I'd grown up with had already been killed in action in the war, in the early part of the war. And I felt like a draft dodger because I wasn't in the military, and so many around here had already been drafted. Nearly everybody at my age had been drafted. And so finally I got a chance, and one time I saw an advertisement in the paper that was wanting to recruit some people to do some drafting in the Navy Air Corps. And they were giving a competitive exam in Birmingham one day, and they was asking volunteers to come and take that exam, and for so many positions they had open for doing that drafting in the military. So I went and slipped off one afternoon after work, took a train to Birmingham and took the exam next day and trained back the next night. So I missed one day from work. But I took that exam, and I was lucky enough to be one of those that was chosen. And so I got a reserve commission in the Navy. It was still on reserve, I wasn't active. And so not long after that, our work was shifting around so much that they wanted to transfer a bunch of us to another division of Consolidated Vultee Aircraft. And so I had my chance there, and I eased out, and I didn't want to miss out on another experience in life, so I took my active duty commission in the Navy and went on active duty. But it turned out that they didn't need me in that category at that time I went in, and so I became a line officer in the Navy. And I was assigned to a destroyer minesweeper. And so in World War II, the latter half of it, I was on active duty in the Pacific Theater. We made invasions, and on destroyer minesweeping, we were the first ship in, and we swept the mines out while we were being protected by the Air Force, bombing the daylights out of the beach. And so then we'd sweep the mines out so that the others could come in and land. And if we swept one and clipped the cable so that it floated to the surface, one or the other of the ships that's doing the minesweeping would fire at it and explode it and make it inactive. So that's what we did, and then after we got through sweeping mines, our duty was over for a while. They'd put us on some menial task, maybe doing plane guard duty, following an aircraft carrier to make sure if somebody missed the aircraft, missed the plane in landing or taking off, we could pick them up. Our ship intercepted the sound of something coming towards us on the sonar gear one time. And it turned out it was a couple of torpedoes, and the sonar man was a very quick thinking person, and he quickly alerted the officer of the deck, and so he turned the ship towards where the missiles were heading towards us. That gave him a 35-foot target instead of a 325-foot target. And the torpedoes went harmlessly by us. And then our ship turned on the submarine, and it was a small Japanese submarine, and we depth charged it and damaged it enough that they surfaced and stuck up their white flag and surrendered. And our ship took on 21 prisoners of war. But the captain of the ship, not trusting the Japanese, made all of those people strip off nude before we'd take them aboard, because he's afraid they'd have hand grenades or something in their pockets. And so we took them aboard nude, put them down the hold of the ship. We didn't have facilities for prisoners. And we guarded that, of course. And some of the men throw them some dungarees down. They got them some clothes to put on. And crudely, we took care of them there. We gave them plenty of food and water. we didn't mistreat them in any way, and carried them to the next port that had a brig and put them off there, and got rid of them that way. After the war was over, one other interesting story of the war. The war was over, the bomb was dropped, and we were anchored out in a harbor out in one of the islands in the Pacific. And someone on one of the ships there heard on the radio that the war was over, and immediately started blowing the horn on that particular ship, and everybody started shooting flares and celebrating because we were expecting it to be over. One bomb had dropped, and we were anticipating the war would be over in this temporary quickly. And so immediately everybody took up the celebration, and it just bedlam there. There's so much noise that you couldn't hear yourself think, so to speak. And the noise didn't settle down to about midnight. And so at 12 o'clock midnight is my time to go on duty as officer of the deck, and I made the rounds of the ship just to make sure everything's secure. The anchor was secure and not slipping, and everything was shipshape for the evening. And when I went to the fantail of the ship, there were sailors just lined up around the fantail, all of them vomiting. They were just vomiting. Well, I had to look into that. It turned out we had one man aboard. The boy's name was Inman. It was his last name, and he was from East Tennessee up in the hills. And his parents had always been moonshiners. And Inman was a very capable fellow. He was a ship fitter on our ship, but he could repair anything that needed to be repaired. He was just indispensable. But Inman, knowing how to put things together and pipes together, during the last 6 months of the war, he had put together a whiskey still down in the engine room of our destroyer, and they had been stealing cornmeal out of the galley and using that for their mash, and they had been making moonshine whiskey aboard our ship during the last 3 months of the war. And they'd been saving that moonshine for celebration whenever the war was over. And thinking that the war was over, they had pulled out their moonshine and they'd gotten sick on it. And so that was a sick group. Well, the captain heard about it. I did not report it. I thought it was funny. I thought he ought to laughed it off and as a big joke. And instead, he took offense at it and held captain's mask, which was court on board ship, and sentenced Inman to 30 days bread and water treatment next time we hit a port that had a brig. Well, the next port that we hit that had a brig was San Francisco. Being a fellow Tennessean, I felt like I would have volunteered to take, some officer had to carry him to the brig, so I volunteered to take Inman to the brig. And so from San Francisco, we had to cross halfway over the Bay Bridge to Yerba Buena Island there, and that was Treasure Island, and that's where they had the World Fair exhibit early, and that's where the Navy had taken over, and that was their Navy station, and that was their brig. So we went to the brig on Treasure Island, and on the route over from San Francisco across the bridge, crossing through San Francisco and across the bridge, we stopped at a little place there. I felt like somebody on bread and water ought to have plenty to eat. So we gathered up a lot of stuff, and I filled up my shirt with eater snacks and candy bars and my cap. I had room for 2 or 3 bars in there. So I thought I ought to help out a fellow Tennessean. I really still feel like it was a duty, and I felt like he shouldn't have been going to the brig in the first place. So we went over to Treasure Island and got him safely installed there in his room, and hid all of his goodies in his bunk so he wouldn't get caught. Well, it turned out that when his month on bread and water, Inman gained several pounds of weight. But I still feel like that was the right thing to do for a fellow Tennessean, and I'd do it again if it was necessary. Even though I was an officer and he was an enlisted man, and we always took care of each other. And you can bet your boots, I had one friend aboard ship that would have done anything at all for me too. Likewise. So after the war was over, on the way back, I called my brother, who was already out of service and working in Nashville. Called him and had him transfer my credits from from Cumberland University in Lebanon over to Vanderbilt Medical School. And so en route home from the Navy, I stopped off in Nashville, still wearing Navy uniform, went over to Vanderbilt and checked to see if I could get in medical school. It was 4th of July weekend, and Dr. Clark, the dean, was interviewing me, and I didn't know. I asked him, I said, any vacancies in the fall class? And he says, yes, 2. I said, any applicants for it? He said, yeah, about 1,600. I got up, I said, well, I might as well go home. I can't compete with 1,600. You know, he says, sit back down, I like your credentials. And I was lucky enough to get one of those 2 places. And after a couple of weeks, I hadn't heard from medical school, so I went down to check on it. I need to get back to work. I never believed in loafing. And so I went in, and they were typing me a letter of acceptance. And they said, the secretary says, I believe Dr. Clark would like to talk to you again. So I went in to see him, and he says, what do you know about a person named Bill Cleveland from Carthage? I said, well, he was one of my best friends growing up. We were in Boy Scouts together, camped together, and played basketball together, and were real good friends. And when he says, what about him academically? I said, he's one of the brightest students I have ever known. He's brilliant. He graduated from Harvard, and he's been a chemist in a First Texas Chemical Company in Texas for a number of years now. He's brilliant. He says, we're considering him from the other place. So Bill and I got those last 2 places, medical school, and we roomed together for a while in medical school and studied together, and we fought the battle of medical school together, and later practiced together for a while here in Carthage. And we remained good friends all of his life, and I went on through medical school. At that time, students at Vanderbilt most of us were moonlighting in temporary jobs and still trying to procure enough money to pay all of our expenses. I had saved my money all through working and through time in the Navy to go to medical school, and I had a little saved up, and along with working sideline jobs and moonlighting a little bit, I managed to get on through and pay for my way through medical school. And I finished there and then went to internship at Nashville General Hospital because I wanted to be a family practitioner. I had offers to do otherwise. Dr. Carter, Oscar Carter, was a urinary tract infection doctor in Nashville, and he offered me a chance of going on and suggested I take training in urology and go and practice with him. Dr. Frist and I became good friends. He was a young internist in Nashville at the time, and we became good friends. But I wanted to go to do family practice in Carthage. I always loved Carthage. I wanted to come back to Carthage, and that's where I wanted to live. I didn't want to live in the big city. So I went over to Nashville General Hospital, and over there's so many emergencies, and it's so diverse that you could get experience in just about anything at all, and it was a wonderful place to train. And actually, Vanderbilt was supplying the residents over there in several different departments, so we were getting good supervision, and we got to do so many different things that we had a chance we were exposed to just about anything you could imagine in medicine over there. And we worked hard. We had 36 hours on and 12 hours off. We'd go to work one morning and we'd get off the next night, and we'd be off for one night, and then the next night we worked. So we had 36 hours on duty and 12 hours off. And so I worked through a year there and then came to Carthage and set up practice. And at that time we did not have a hospital here. They were thinking about building one. And so I started something new in Carthage. I built me a clinic and a little apartment on the side for me and my wife to live in. And I licensed that clinic as a 5-bed hospital. So my clinic, Petty Clinic, was the first licensed hospital in Carthage. And before that, practically all of the obstetrics was going to Lebanon, and they were delivering their babies over in Lebanon. Some of the doctors here would go over there. Dr. Wilson was doing some in his office occasionally, but most of the obstetrics went to Lebanon and some to Nashville. So I started doing my deliveries in my own office, which was a licensed hospital. And it was licensed not only for the purpose of me being legal in doing these things, but also so that if they had insurance, they could claim hospital insurance and get payment for their obstetrical delivery there. And so I delivered a few thousand babies right there in that clinic. And so that was a big change, and also I did a whole lot of surgery there. I did lots of tonsillectomies and adenoidectomies and other surgery. And, that was about as major as I did there. And then after a couple of years, the county built a county hospital, and so then we had the prerogative of expanding our medical practice a little further and doing other surgery. Dr. Sam Garrett, who was a year ahead of me in training, medical training, was a superb surgeon. He was a board surgeon. He had his national boards in surgery, and he was a very good general surgeon. And so Sam started coming to my place every Friday. I believe it was on Friday, and he'd hold office hours in my clinic and see any patients that I wanted to refer, or any other doctors in the county that wanted to refer to him to be seen for surgery. And he could do surgery at the local hospital, or he could carry him with him to Nashville and operate in the hospital where he was operating there. He was on the board of surgery for any of the hospitals in Nashville. The county then turned around and leased the hospital to 2 other doctors in the county, and they decided that they wanted to cut down on the hospitalization here and make some more money out of it. So they hired them a surgeon to do surgery, and they just decreed that nobody else would do surgery there in this county, except in their hospital, except the one that they had selected. So we could either use their hospital and their surgeon, or that was it. So Dr. Garrett and I brought suit against the other 2 doctors, and it went through the state Supreme Court. The trial did, and we won the right to do surgery in our hospital. So then after that, Dr. Garrett and I could do surgery in our hospital here. And so then we had a general surgery practice, and along with everything else, and we did practice everything. Shortly after that, Dr. Green got dissatisfied with his partner in Carthage and opted out of surgery and went down and started taking some more training in Nashville, and I went down and talked to Dr. Green joining me. So Dr. Green and I then had Petty Green Clinic for a while, and it was a very happy relationship. We did just about everything you could imagine in the clinic or in the local hospital at that time. And Dr. Garrett coming in, a board surgeon, we did everything. We did obstetrics, we did general surgery, just about anything you could name. We treated heart attacks, pediatrics, the whole works. And so we had a pretty complete outfit there, and we took in another fella. Dr. Garrett joined our group as a part of the group, and we took in Dr. Rowe as a general practitioner. So we had 4 doctors that practicing in that area, in that unit in Petty Green Clinic. And we changed the name to Smith County Medical Center then, and so the 4 of us ran the practice of medicine there. And at that time we referred very few people to specialists outside the county, particularly anything to Nashville, because we could do practically all of it there. So, but medicine has changed now. It's just not like it used to be then. Right now, you go to a general practitioner, if you can find one, and he'll treat a few of the things, but he refers so many of the things instead of treating them there. Specialization has gotten so bad that almost to the point that if you have an earache, you either go to a right ear doctor or a left ear doctor to get treated. Not quite that bad, but almost. And so it's been a big change, and I don't think the demise of general practice is good for the rural area, because you have to go somewhere else for just about everything. So the family practitioner is almost a thing of the past. And I believe that the family practitioner back in those days was a very useful thing for the rural communities.